When I was 12 years old, I moved into the third-floor apartment of my parents' house. It had once belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman who had been a constant presence in our lives until her passing. The apartment, a small but cozy space with slanted ceilings and old wooden beams, had a certain charm to it. It was full of her old furniture and knickknacks, all remnants of a life that seemed so far away, yet strangely close. Little did I know, moving into this apartment would lead to some of the most unsettling experiences of my life. The third floor had always felt different from the rest of the house. My grandparents lived on the ground floor, and my parents and brother lived on the second. It was a lively home, always full of conversation and warmth. But the third floor, my floor, felt quieter, almost too quiet. There was a stillness in the air, a weight that seemed to settle over everything, especially at night. I tried to make the space my own, rearranging the furniture frequently to get the layout just right. For a while, I had my bed against the slanted wall, with my TV set up directly in front of it. It felt like a good arrangement, comfortable, practical. But that's when the strange occurrences began. At first, it was subtle. I would be lying in bed, half watching TV, and half scrolling through my phone. From the corner of my eye, I would catch a quick movement, a shadow darting to the left of the television. It was so fast and so fleeting that I almost convinced myself it was a trick of the light, something explainable. I dismissed it as an illusion, a mere figment of my imagination. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. This shadow became a regular occurrence. It didn't matter what time of day it was, morning, afternoon, or night, it would always appear in that same spot. A quick, dark blur moving just at the edge of my vision. I never mentioned it to anyone, figuring there was no point in bringing up something so vague and easily dismissed. That is, until the night my friend stayed over. We were lying in bed, much like any other night, with the TV playing quietly in the background. Both of us were engrossed in our phones when I saw it again, the shadow moving swiftly across the left side of the television. My heart skipped a beat, but I tried to ignore it. After all, it had happened so many times before that I had grown almost used to it. But this time, something was different. "Did you see that?" my friend asked, her voice low and uncertain. I turned to her, my blood running cold. "See what?" "The shadow, over there," she said, pointing to the exact spot where I had seen it so many times before. It moved really fast. I thought it was just me, but my jaw dropped. It wasn't just me. Someone else had seen it too. The fact that my friend had noticed the same shadow, in the same spot, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't my imagination. Something was there. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to leave the room as it was. The feeling of being watched had grown too strong, too real. The shadow wasn't just an optical illusion, it was a presence, something I could feel. It seemed to linger, watching me, waiting for something. The very air in the room felt heavier, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was casting that shadow didn't want me there. I decided to change the layout of my room. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt necessary. I moved my bed to the wall by the door and placed the TV on the opposite side of the room. It was a simple change, but as soon as I did it, the atmosphere shifted. The shadow disappeared. It was as if, by rearranging the furniture, I had disrupted whatever pattern had been at play. The room felt lighter, less oppressive. For the first time in months, I could relax. But even though the shadow was gone, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way it had moved, the way it always appeared in the same place, it felt deliberate, as though it had a purpose. My mind kept returning to my great-grandmother, the woman who had lived in that apartment before me. She had passed away peacefully in her sleep, but her presence was still felt throughout the house, especially in the third-floor apartment. Sometimes, I would catch the faint scent of her perfume, a soft, floral fragrance that wasn't used by anyone else in the family. It would drift through the apartment at odd times, particularly in the evening, when the house was quiet. I began to wonder if the shadow was somehow connected to her. Was it possible that her spirit had lingered in the apartment after her death? Was she trying to communicate with me? Or was it something else entirely, something darker? The more I thought about it, the more questions I had, but no answers ever came. Even after I moved out of my parents' house and into a new place, I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow. The new house was different, bright, modern, and free of any paranormal disturbances. I never saw any shadows there, never felt the weight of an unseen presence. It was a relief, but it also left me wondering. Had the shadow been tied to the house, or to me? Had I left it behind, or was it simply waiting for the right moment to reappear? And if it was connected to my great-grandmother, what had changing the layout of my room really done? Had I given her peace, or had I disturbed something that should have been left alone? These are questions I'll probably never have answers to. But one thing is certain, the shadow may be gone, but the memory of it still lingers. Even now, years later, I can still see it in my mind, the dark blur darting across the room just beyond the edge of my vision. A reminder of a time when I lived in a house where the past was never truly gone and the shadows were more than just tricks of the light. After rearranging the furniture in my room, the shadow that had always appeared to the left of the TV stopped manifesting. I felt an immediate sense of relief, as though an invisible weight had been lifted. However, even though the shadow was gone, the atmosphere of the third floor remained heavy, filled with an odd stillness. Something about that part of the house still felt different. Weeks passed without incident, and I almost convinced myself that whatever had been haunting me was gone for good. But one night, as I was getting ready for bed, something new happened. The lights were off, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the wind outside. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when suddenly, I heard a faint noise. It was so quiet at first that I thought I had imagined it, a soft, almost imperceptible tapping sound. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, straining to listen. There it was again, this time louder. The tapping seemed to be coming from the wall opposite my bed, the one where I had moved the TV. It was rhythmic, steady, like someone gently knocking on the wall from the other side. My immediate thought was that it could be the pipes or something mechanical in the house, but the tapping didn't sound like anything I had ever heard before. It sounded too deliberate. I tried to brush it off as a fluke, an old house making strange noises, and lay back down. But the sound persisted. Each knock echoed in the stillness of the room, sending chills down my spine. Finally, I gathered the courage to get out of bed and walk toward the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. I placed my hand against the cold surface, hoping to feel some sort of vibration or explanation for the noise. Nothing. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the tapping stopped. I stood there in the dark, frozen, listening to the deafening silence. For a moment, I thought I had scared it away, whatever it was. But as I turned to go back to bed, something else happened that made my skin crawl. The smell of my great-grandmother's perfume filled the room, a sweet, floral scent I hadn't smelled in years. It was unmistakable, as if she were standing right next to me. I knew it wasn't possible, she had passed years ago. But the scent lingered, thick in the air, enveloping me. I ran back to my bed, pulling the covers over me like a child, my heart racing. The perfume faded slowly, but the feeling of being watched remained. It was as if something was there, quietly observing me from the shadows. I couldn't shake the sense that whatever had been moving the shadow before was still in the room with me, just more subtle, more deliberate in its attempts to make its presence known. For the rest of that night, I barely slept, my eyes flicking to the corners of the room, watching, waiting for the shadow to reappear or for the tapping to start again. But nothing else happened. After that night, I started to avoid the third floor as much as possible. I still lived there, but I spent most of my time downstairs with my family. The oppressive feeling on the third floor never really went away, and each time I climbed the stairs to my room, I felt that same overwhelming sensation of being watched. One evening, as I was sitting with my parents at the dinner table, I decided to tell them about the strange occurrences in the house. My mom looked at me with concern, while my dad simply nodded, as if he had been expecting this conversation. "You know," my dad said, his voice low, "you're not the first one to feel something up there." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. He went on to explain that after my great-grandmother had passed, strange things started happening on the third floor. My grandparents had originally planned to rent out the apartment to another family member, but after multiple people had experiences similar to mine, strange noises, shadows, and that unmistakable perfume said no one wanted to stay there. They all felt something was off, like the apartment was stuck in time, haunted by the spirit of my great-grandmother or something else entirely. My mom shared her own experiences too. She had once heard faint whispers coming from the third floor when no one was up there. Another time, she felt a cold breeze rush past her while climbing the stairs, but all the windows had been closed. "It's as if the house has a memory," she said quietly, "and it keeps replaying over and over." I felt a chill run down my spine. The realization hit me then: the house wasn't just haunted by memories, it was haunted by something alive, something that had taken root in the walls and floors. My great-grandmother's presence wasn't malevolent, but it wasn't at peace either. Maybe she was trying to communicate, or maybe she was just trapped, reliving moments of her life within the confines of the home she once loved. A few days later, I had my final encounter with the entity in the house. It was late at night, and once again, I was in my room. The air was still, heavy with the quiet tension that had become familiar. As I lay in bed, the tapping started again, but this time it was louder, more insistent. The perfume returned too, stronger than before, almost suffocating. I tried to remain calm, telling myself that it was just the house, old wood, old memories, but then I saw it. The shadow. It moved quickly across the room, not near the TV this time, but right in front of my bed. It was taller now, more defined, like a figure standing just beyond the reach of the light. I couldn't make out any features, but I could feel its eyes on me. It lingered for a few moments, just standing there, as if waiting for something. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. I knew then that it was time to leave. The house had revealed enough. It wasn't angry, but it was clear that something unresolved lingered within those walls. Shortly after, my family decided to move, and I never saw the shadow again. Though the experiences in my parents' house left me shaken, they also left me curious. What had caused the shadow? Was it my great-grandmother, or something else entirely? The answers never came, but the memories of that house, and the eerie presence within, will stay with me forever.